Ain't got no lotion, you ain't popping. Barbara Anderson, who worked in a bank in New York, desired to move to Phoenix, Arizona because of the health of her son. Using the principles she had learned in our course, she wrote the following letter to 12 banks in Phoenix. Dear sir, my 10 years of bank experience should be of interest to a rapidly growing bank like yours in various capacities in bank operations with the bankers trust community in New York, leading to my present assignments as branch manager. I have acquired skills in all phases of banking, including depositor relations, credits, loans, and administration. I'll be relocating to Phoenix in May, and I am sure I can contribute to your growth and profit. I will be in Phoenix the week of April 3rd and would appreciate the opportunity to show you how I can help your bank meet its goals. Nah, remember that one day we went to Elijah's doctor's appointment? I just couldn't stop crying and laughing. Yeah, that was hilarious. I'm gonna cut that last 30 seconds out, but
Can I tell you just real quick?
hmm. He just popped up.
Because yeah. I don't think my son ever scared me like this. Imagine, I would have, oh my gosh.
That's how Noah gonna be laid up.
You finished?
Put that in.
Let me see this.
Oh, that's because I'm laying down all night.
Alright, here, put this in the kitchen.
In the fridge or something.
Yeah.
This is that.
No,
No,
thank you.
he's not a food disposer.
You can put it in the sink. I mean in the
Like, get ready for the end. Oh, his boyfriend's driving. Like, wait. he's like, I can't
Okay.
go.
Okay, go do what you're supposed to do.
He goes walking off like,
Alright, David's trying to leave. I already interrupted him. I need this help.
You got it.
You going to the bathroom? Go, hurry up.
I'll be in Phoenix the week of April 3rd and would appreciate the opportunity to show you how I can help your bank meet its goals. Sincerely, Barbara L. Anderson. Do you think Mrs. Anderson received any responses from that letter? 11 of the 12 banks invited her to be interviewed, and she had a choice of which bank's offer to accept. Why Miss Anderson did not state what she wanted, but she wrote in the letter how she can help them and focused on their wants, not her own. Thousands of salespeople are pounding the pavements today, tired, discouraged, and underpaid. Why? Because they are always thinking only of what they want. They don't realize they don't realize that neither you nor I want to buy anything. If we did, we would go out and buy it. But both of us are eternally interested in solving our problems. And if salespeople can show us how their services or merchandise will help us solve our problems, they won't need to sell us. We'll buy. and customers like to feel that they are buying, not being sold. Yet many salespeople spend a lifetime in selling without seeing things from the customer's angle. For example, many years I lived in Forest Hills, a little community of private homes in the center of Greater New York. One day, as I was rushing to the station, I chanced to meet a real estate operator who had bought and sold property in that area for many years. He knew Forest Hills well, so I hurriedly asked him whether or not my stucco house was built with metal lath or hollow tile. He said he didn't know and told me what I already knew, that I could find out by calling the Forest Hills Garden Association. The following morning, I received a letter from him. Did he give me information I wanted? He could have gotten it in 60 seconds by a telephone call, but he didn't. He told me again that I could get it by telephoning, and then asked me to let him handle my insurance. He was not interested in helping me. He was interested only in helping himself. J. Howard Lucas of Birmingham, Alabama, tells how two salespeople from the same company handled the same type of situation. He reported, "Several years ago, I was on the management team of a small company. Headquartered near us was the district office of a large insurance company. Their agents were assigned to territories, and our company was assigned to two agents, whom I shall refer to as Carl and John. One morning, Carl dropped by our office and casually mentioned that his company had just introduced a new life insurance policy for executives and thought we might be interested later on, and he would get back to us when he had more information on it. The same day, John saw us on the sidewalk while returning from a coffee break, and he shouted, 'Hey, Luke, hold up. I have some great news for you fellas.' He hurried over and very excitedly told us about an executive life insurance policy his company had introduced that very day. It was the same policy that Carl had casually mentioned. He wanted us to have one of the first issued. He gave us a few important facts about the coverage and ended saying, 'The policy is so new I'm going to have someone from the home office come out tomorrow and explain it. Now in the meantime, let's get the application signed and on the way so he can have more information to work with.' His enthusiasm aroused in us an eager want for this policy, even though we still did not have details. When they were made available to us, they confirmed John's initial understanding of the policy, and he not only sold each of us a policy, but later doubled our coverage. Carl could have had those sales, but he made no effort to arouse in us any desire for the policies. The world is full of people who are grabbing and self-seeking, so the rare individual who unselfishly tries to serve others has an enormous advantage. He has little competition. Owen D. Young, a noted lawyer and one of America's great business leaders, once said, "People who can put themselves in the place of other people, who can understand the workings of their minds, need never worry about what the future has in store for them. If out of reading this book you get just one thing, an increased tendency to think always in terms of other people's point of view." I'm going to start at. I'm going to reread it again. If out of reading this book you get just one thing, an increased tendency to think always in terms of other people's point of view, and see things from their angle. If you get that one thing out of this book, it may easily prove to be one of the building blocks of your career. Looking at the other person's point of view and arousing in him an eager want for something is not to be construed as manipulating that person so that he will do something that is only for your benefit and his detriment. Each party should gain from the negotiation. In the letters to Mr. Vermeulen, both the sender and the receiver to the correspondence gained by implementing what was suggested. Both the bank and Mrs. Anderson won by her letter, and the bank obtained a valuable employee. Both the bank and Mrs. Anderson won by her letter, and the bank obtained valuable by her letter, in that the bank obtained a valuable employee, and Mrs. Anderson a suitable job. And in the example of John's sale of insurance to Mr. Lucas, both gained through this transaction. Another example in which everybody gains through this principle of arousing an eager want comes from Michael E. Whitten of Warwick, Rhode Island, who was a territory salesman for Shell Oil Company. Mike wanted to become the number one salesperson in his district, but one service station was holding him back. It was run by an older man who could not be motivated to clean up his station. It was in such poor shape that sales were declining significantly. This manager would not listen to any of Mike's pleas to upgrade the station. After many exhortations and heart-to-heart talks, all of which had no impact, Mike decided to invite the manager to visit the newest Shell station in his territory. The manager was so impressed by the facilities at the new station that when Mike visited him the next time, his station was cleaned up and had recorded a sales increase. This enabled Mike to reach the number one spot in his district. All his talking and discussion hadn't helped, but by arousing an eager want in the manager, by showing him the modern station, he had accomplished his goal, and both the manager and Mike benefited. Most people go through college and learn to read Virgil and master the mysteries of calculus without ever discovering how their own minds function. For instance, I once gave a course in effective speaking for the young college graduates who were entering the employ of the Carrier Corporation, the large air conditioner manufacturer. One of the participants wanted to persuade the others to play basketball in their free time, and this is about what he said. I want you to come out and play basketball. I like to play basketball, but the few times I've been to the gymnasium, there haven't been enough people to get up a game. 2 or 3 of us got to throwing the ball around the other night, and I got a black eye. I wish all you would come down tomorrow night. I want to play basketball. Did he talk about anything you want? You don't want to go to a gymnasium that no one else goes to, do you? You don't care about what he wants. You don't want to get a black eye. Could he have shown you how to get the things you want by using the gymnasium? Surely. More pep. Keener edge to the appetite. Clearer brain. Fun. Games. Basketball. To repeat Professor Overstreet's wise advice, first arouse in the other person an eager want. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. One of the students in the author's training course was worried about his little boy. The child was underweight and refused to eat properly. His parents used the usual method. They scolded and nagged him. Mother wants you to eat this and that. Father wants you to grow up to be a big man. Did the boy pay any attention to these pleas? Just about as much as you pay to one fleck of sand on a sandy beach. No one with a trace of horse sense would expect a child 3 years old to react to the viewpoint of a father 30 years old. Yet that was precisely what the father had expected. It was absurd. He finally saw that, so he said to himself, "What does that boy want? How can I tie up what I want to what he wants?" I'm going to do that. I'm going to underline that. So he said to himself, "What does that boy want? How can I tie up what I want to what he wants?" It was easy for the father when he started thinking about it. His boy had a tricycle that he had loved to ride up and down the sidewalk in front of the house in Brooklyn. A few doors down the street lived a bully, a bigger boy who would pull the little boy off his tricycle and ride it himself. Naturally, the little boy would run screaming to his mother, and she would have to come out and take the bully off the tricycle and put her little boy on again. This happened almost every day. What did the little boy want? It didn't take a Sherlock Holmes to answer that one. His pride, his anger, his desire for a feeling of importance, all the strongest emotions in his makeup, goaded him to revenge, to smash the bully in the nose. And when his father explained that the boy would be able to wall up the daylights of the bigger kid someday if he would only eat the things his mother wants him to eat, when his father promised him that, there was no longer any problem in the dietetics. That boy would have eaten spinach, sauerkraut, salt mackerel, anything in order to be big enough to whip the bully who had humiliated him so often. After solving that problem, the parents tackled another. The little boy had the unholy habit of wetting the bed. He slept with his grandmother. In the morning, his grandmother would wake up and feel the sheet and say, "Look, Johnny, what you did again last night. He would say, no, I didn't do what you did. Scolding, spanking, shaming him, reiterating that his parents didn't want him to do it. None of these kept the bed dry. So the parents asked, how can we make this boy want to stop wetting his bed? What were his wants? First, he wanted to wear pajamas, like Daddy, instead of wearing a nightgown like grandmother. Grandmother was getting fed up with his nocturnal iniquities, so she gladly offered to buy him a pair of pajamas if he would reform. Secondly, he wanted a bed of his own. Grandma didn't object. His mother took him to a department store in Brooklyn, winked at the salesgirl, and said, he's a little gentleman who would like to do some shopping. The salesgirl made him feel important by saying, young man, what can I show you? He stood up a couple inches taller and said, I want to buy a bed for myself. When he was shown the one his mother wanted him to buy, she winked at the salesgirl and the boy was persuaded to buy it. The bed was delivered the next day, and that night, when father came home, the little boy ran to the door shouting, Daddy, Daddy, come upstairs and see my bed that I bought. The father, looking at the bed, obeyed Charles Schwab's injunction. He was hearty in his approbation and lavish in his praise. You are not going to wet this bed, are you? The father said, Oh, no, no. The father said, Oh, no, no, I am not going to wet this bed. The boy kept his promise, for his pride was involved. That was his bed. He and he alone had bought it, and he was wearing pajamas, now like a little man. He wanted to act like a man, and he did. Another father, K.T. Dutchman, a telephone engineer, a student of this course, couldn't get a 3-year-old daughter to eat breakfast food. The usual scolding, pleading, and coaxing methods had all ended in futility. So the parents asked themselves, how can we make her want to do it? The little girl loved to imitate her mother, to feel big and grown up. So one morning they put her on a chair and let her make the breakfast food. At just this psychological moment, father drifted into the kitchen while she was stirring the cereal and said, Oh, look, Daddy, I am making the cereal this morning. She ate 2 helpings of the cereal without coaxing because she was interested in it. She had achieved a feeling of importance. She had found in making, I'm going to underline that. She had achieved a feeling of importance. She had found in making the cereal an avenue of self-expression. William Winter once remarked that self-expression is the dominant necessity of human nature. Why can't we adapt this same psychology to business dealings? When we have a brilliant idea, instead of making others think it's ours, why not let them cook and stir the idea themselves? They will then regard it as their own. They will make it and maybe eat a couple of helpings of it. Remember, first arousing it in the other person an eager want. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He cannot walk a lonely way. How to win friends. Why not study the technique of the greatest winner of friends the world has ever known? Who is he? You may meet him tomorrow coming down the street. When you get within 10 feet of him, he will begin to wag his tail. If you stop and pat him, he will almost jump out of his skin to show you how much he likes you. And you know that behind this show of affection on his part, there are no ulterior motives. He doesn't want to sell you any real estate. He doesn't want to marry you. Did you ever stop to think that a dog is the only animal that doesn't have to work for a living? A hen has to lay eggs, a cow has to give milk, a canary has to sing, but a dog makes his living by giving you nothing but love. When I was 5 years old, my father bought a little yellow-haired pup for 50 cents. He was the light and joy of my childhood. Every afternoon about 4:30, he would sit in the front yard with his beautiful eyes staring steadfastly at the path, and as soon as he heard my voice or saw me swinging my dinner pail through the brush, he was off like a shot, racing breathlessly up the hill to greet me with leaps of joy and barks of sheer ecstasy. Tippy was my constant companion for 5 years. Then one tragic night, I shall never forget it, he was killed within 10 feet of my head, killed by lightning. Tippy's death was the tragedy of my boyhood. You never read a book on psychology, Tippy. You never read a book on psychology, Tippy. You didn't need to know. You didn't need to. You knew by divine instinct that you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming genuinely interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. Let me repeat that. You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. Yet I know, and you know, people who blunder through life trying to wigwag other people into becoming interested in them. Of course it doesn't work. People are not interested in you, they are not interested in me, they're interested in themselves, morning, noon, and after dinner. The New York Telephone Company made a detailed study of telephone conversation to find out which word is the most frequently used. You have guessed it, it is a personal pronoun. I. It was used 3,900 times in 500 telephone conversations. I. When you see a group photograph that you are in, whose picture do you look for first? If we merely try to impress people and get people interested in us, we will never have many true, sincere friends. Friends, real friends, are not made that way. Napoleon tried it, and in his last meeting with Josephine said, Josephine, I've been as fortunate as any man has ever on this earth, and yet, at this hour, you are the only person in the world on whom I can rely. And historians doubt whether he could rely even on her. Alfred Adler, the famous Viennese psychologist, wrote a book entitled, What Life Should Mean to You. In that book he says, it is the individual who is not interested in his fellow men who has the greatest difficulties in life and provides the greatest injury to others. It is from among such individuals that all human failures spring. You may read scores of erudite tomes on psychology without coming across a statement more significant for you and for me. Adler's statement is so rich with meaning that I am going to repeat it in italics. It is the individual who is not interested in his fellow men who has the greatest difficulties in life and provides the greatest injury to others. It is from among such individuals that all human failures spring. I once took a course in short story writing at New York University, and during that course, the editor of a leading magazine talked to our class. He said he could pick up any one of the dozens of stories that drifted across his desk every day, and after reading a few paragraphs, he could feel whether or not the author liked people. If the author doesn't like people, he said, people won't like his or her stories. The hard-boiled editor stopped twice in the course of his talk on fiction writing and apologized for preaching a sermon. I'm telling you, he said, the same things your preacher would tell you, but remember, you have to be interested in people if you want to be a successful writer of stories. I'll underline that. I am telling you, same things your preacher would tell you. But remember, you have to be interested in people if you want to be a successful writer of stories. If that is true of writing fiction, you can be sure it is true of dealing with people face to face. I spent an evening in the dressing room of Howard Thurston the last time he appeared on Broadway. Thurston was the acknowledged dean of magicians. For 40 years, he had traveled all over the world, time and again, creating illusions, mystifying audiences, and making people gasp with astonishment. More than 6 million people had paid admission to his show. He had made almost $2 million in profit. I asked Mr. Thurston to tell me the secret of his success. His schooling certainly had nothing to do with it, for he ran away from home as a small boy, became a hobo, rode in boxcars, slept in haystacks, begged his food from door to door, and learned to read by looking out of boxcars at signs along the railway. Did he have a superior knowledge of magic? No. He told me hundreds of books had been written about Legerdemain, and scores of people knew as much about it as he did. But he had two things that others didn't have. First, he had the ability to put his personality across the footlights. He was a master showman. He knew human nature. Everything he did, every gesture, every intonation of his voice, every lifting of an eyebrow had been carefully rehearsed in advance, and his actions were timed to split seconds. But in addition to that, Thurston had a genuine interest in people. He told me that many magicians would look at the audience and say to themselves, well, there's a bunch of suckers out there, a bunch of hicks. I'll fool all of them, right? But Thurton's method was totally different. He told me that every time he went on stage, he said to himself, I am grateful because these people come to see me. They make it possible for me to make my living in a very agreeable way. I'm going to give them the very best I possibly can. I'm grateful because these people come to see me. They make it possible for me to make my living in a very agreeable way. I'm going to give them the very best I possibly can. He declared he never stepped in front of the footlights without first saying to himself over and over, I love my audience, I love my audience. Ridiculous? Absurd? You're privileged to think anything you like. I am merely passing it on to you without comment as a recipe used by one of the most famous magicians of all times. I love my audience. I love my audience. George Dyke of North Warren, Pennsylvania, was forced to retire from his service station business after 30 years when a new highway was constructed over the site of his station. It wasn't long before the idle days of retirement began to bore him, so he started filling in his time trying to play music on his old fiddle. Soon he was traveling the area to listen to music and talk with many of the accomplished fiddlers. In his humble and friendly way, he began generally interested in learning the background and interests of every musician he met. Although he was not a great fiddler himself, he made many friends in this pursuit. He attended competitions and soon became known to the country music fans in the eastern part of the United States as Uncle George, the fiddle scraper from Canosa County. When we heard Uncle George, he was 72 and enjoying every minute of his life. By having a sustained interest in other people, he created a new life for himself at a time when most people consider their productive years over. That, too, was one of the secrets of Theodore Roosevelt's astonishing popularity. Even his servants loved him. His valet, James E. Amos, wrote a book about him entitled Theodore Roosevelt, Hero to His Valet. In that book, Amos relates this illuminating incident. My wife one time asked the president about a Bob White. She had never seen one, and he described it to her fully. Sometime later, the telephone at our cottage rang. Amos and his wife lived in a very little cottage on the Roosevelt estate at Oyster Bay. His wife answered it, and it was Mr. Roosevelt himself. He called her. He said to tell her that there was a Bob White outside her window, and that if she would look out, she might see it. Little things like that were so characteristic of him. Whenever he went by our cottage, even though we were out of sight, we would hear him call out, "Ooh, ooh, ooh, Annie," or "Ooh, James." It was just a friendly greeting as he went by. How could employees keep from liking a man like that? How could anyone keep from liking him? Roosevelt called at the White House one day when the President and Mrs. Taft were away. His honest liking for humble people was shown by the fact that he greeted all the old White House servants by name, even the scullery maids. When he saw Alice, the kitchen maid, writes Archie Butt, he asked her if she still made cornbread. Alice told him that she sometimes made it for the servants, but no one ate it upstairs. They show bad taste, Roosevelt boomed, and I'll tell the president so when I see him. Alice bought a piece to him on a plate, and he went over to the office, eating it as he went and greeting gardeners and laborers as he passed. He addressed each person just as he had addressed them in the past, like Hoover, who had been head usher at the White House for 40 years, said with tears in his eyes, "It is the only happy day we had in nearly 2 years, and not one of us would exchange it for a $100 bill." The same concern for the seemingly unimportant people helped sales representative Edward M. Sykes, Jr. of Chatham, New Jersey, retain an account. Many years ago, he reported, I called on customers for Johnson & Johnson in the Massachusetts area. One account was a drugstore in Higham. Whenever I went into the store, I would always talk to the soda clerk and sales clerk for a few minutes before talking to the owner to obtain his order. One day I went up to the owner of the store and he told me to leave as he was not interested in buying J&J products anymore because he felt they were concentrating their activities on food and discount stores to the detriment of the small drugstore. I left with my tail between my legs and drove around town for several hours. Finally, I decided to go back and try at least to explain our position to the owner of the store. When I returned, I walked in and as usual said hello to the sorter clerk and the sales clerk. When I walked up to the owner, he smiled at me and welcomed me back. He then gave me double the usual order. I looked at him with surprise and asked him what had happened since my visit was only a few hours earlier. He pointed to the young man at the soda fountain and said that after I had left, the boy had come over and said that I was one of the few salespeople that called on the store that even bothered to say hello to him and to the others in the store. He told the owner that if any salesperson deserved his business, it was I. The owner agreed and remained a loyal customer. I never forgot that to be genuinely interested in other people and the most important quality for a salesperson to possess, for any person for that matter. I've discovered from personal experience that one can win the attention and time and cooperation of even the most sought after people by becoming genuinely interested in them. Let me illustrate. Years ago, I conducted a course in fiction writing at the Brooklyn Institute of Arts and Sciences, and we wanted such distinguished and busy authors as Kathleen Norris, Fannie Hurst, Ida Tarbell, Albert Payson Chihurin, and Rupert Hughes to come to Brooklyn and give us the benefit of their experiences. So we wrote them, saying we admired their work and were deeply interested in getting their advice and learning the secrets of their success. Each of these letters was signed by about 150 students. We said we realized that these authors were busy, too busy to prepare a lecture, so we enclosed a list of questions for them to answer about themselves and their methods of work. They liked that. Who wouldn't like it? So they left their homes, traveled to Brooklyn to give us a helping hand. By using the same method, I persuaded Leslie M. Shaw, Secretary of Treasury in Theodore Roosevelt's cabinet, George W. Wickerham's Attorney General in Taft's cabinet, William Jennings Bryan, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and many other prominent men to come to talk to the students of my courses in public speaking. All of us, be workers in a factory, clerks in an office, or even a king upon his throne, all of us like people who admire us. Take the German Kaiser, for example. At the close of World War I, he was probably the most savagely and universally despised man on the earth. Even his own nation turned against him when he fled over into the Holland to save his neck. The hatred against him was so intense that millions of people would have loved to tear him limb from limb or burn him at the stake. In the midst of all this forest fire or fury, one little boy wrote the Kaiser a simple, sincere letter glowing with kindness and admiration. This little boy said that no matter what the others thought, he would always love Wilhelm as his emperor. The Kaiser was so deeply touched by his letter and invited the little boy to come to see him. The boy came, so did his mother, and the Kaiser married her. That little boy didn't need to read a book on how to win friends and influence people. He knew how instinctively. If we want to make friends, let's put ourselves out to do things for other people. If we want to make friends, let's put ourselves out to do things for other people. If we want to make friends, let's put ourselves out to do things for other people. Things that require time, energy, unselfishness, and thoughtfulness. When the Duke of Windsor was Prince of Wales, he was scheduled to tour South America, but before he started out on that tour, he spent months studying Spanish so that he could make public talks in the language of the country, and the South Americans loved him for it. For years, I made it a point to find out the birthdays of my friends. How? Although I haven't the foggiest bit of faith in astrology, I begin by asking the other party whether he believed the date of one's birth has anything to do with the character and disposition. I then asked him or her to tell me the month and day of birth. If he or she said November 24th, for example, I kept repeating to myself November 24, November 24. The minute my friend's back was turned, I wrote down the name and birthday and later would transfer it to a birthday book. At the beginning of each year, I had these birthdays scheduled in my calendar so that they came to my attention automatically. When the natal day arrived, there was my letter or telegram. What a hit it made. I was frequently the only person on earth who remembered. If we want to make friends, let's greet people with animation, and enthusiasm. Amen. When somebody calls you on the telephone, use the same psychology. Say hello in tones that bespeak how pleased you are to have the person call. Many companies train their telephone operators to greet all callers in a tone of voice that radiates interest and enthusiasm. The caller feels the company is concerned about them. Let's remember that when we answer the telephone tomorrow. Showing a genuine interest in others not only wins friends for you, but may develop in its customers a loyalty to your company. In an issue of the publication of the National Bank of North America of New York, the following letter from Madeline Rosedale, a depositor, was published. I would like you to know how much I appreciate your staff. Everyone is so courteous, polite, and helpful. What a pleasure it is, after waiting on a long line, to have the teller greet you pleasantly. Last year, my mother was hospitalized for 5 months. Frequently, I went to Mary Petrello, a teller. She was concerned about my mother and inquired about her progress. Is there any doubt that Miss Rosedale will continue to use this bank? Charles R. Walters, of one of the large banks in New York City, was assigned to prepare a confidential report on a certain corporation. He knew of only one person who possessed the facts he needed so urgently. As Mr. Walters was ushered into the president's office, a young man stuck her head through a door and told the president that she didn't have any stamps for him that day. I'm collecting stamps for my 12-year-old son, the president explained to Mr. Walters. Mr. Walters stated his mission and began asking questions. The president was vague, general, nebulous. He didn't want to talk, and apparently nothing could persuade him to talk. The interview was brief and barren. Frankly, I didn't know what to do, Mr. Walters said as he related the story to the class. Then I remembered what his secretary had said to him. Stamps, 12-year-old son. And I also recalled that the foreign department of our bank collected stamps. Stamps taken from letters pouring in from every continent, washed by the 7 seas. The next afternoon, I called on this man and sent in word that I had some stamps for his boy. Was I ushered in with enthusiasm? Yes, sir. He couldn't have shaken my hand with more enthusiasm if he had been running for Congress. Mike Chitterelli. He radiated smiles and goodwill. My George will love this one, he kept saying as he fondled the stamps. And look at this. This is a treasure. We spent half an hour talking stamps and looking at a picture of his boy, and then devoted more than an hour of his time to giving me every bit of information I wanted without even suggesting that he do it. He told me all he knew and then called in his subordinates and questioned them. He telephoned some of his associates. He loaded me down with facts, figures, reports, and correspondence. In the parlance of newspaper reporters, I had a scoop. Here's another illustration. C.M. Naple, Jr. of Philadelphia had tried for years to sell fuel to a large chain store organization, but the chain store company continued to purchase its fuel from an out-of-town dealer and haul it right past the door of Naple's office. Mr. Naple made a speech one night, before one of my classes, pouring out his hot wrath upon chain stores, branding them as a curse to the nation. And still he wondered why he couldn't sell them. I suggested that he try different tactics. To put it briefly, this is what happened. We staged a debate between members of the course on whether the spread of the chain store is doing the country more harm than good. Naple, at my suggestion, took the negative side. He agreed to defend the chain stores, and then went straight to an executive of the chain store organization that he despised and said, I'm not here to try to sell fuel. I have come to ask you to do me a favor. He then told about his debate and said, I have come to you for help because I can't think of anyone else who would be more capable of giving me the facts I want. I'm anxious to win this debate, and I'll deeply appreciate whatever help you can give me. Here is the rest of the story in Mr. Naples' own words. I had asked this man for precisely 1 minute of his time. It was with that understanding that he consented to me after I had stated my case. He mentioned me to a chair and talked. He motioned me to a chair and talked to me for exactly 1 hour and 47 minutes. He called in another executive who had written a book on chain stores. He wrote the National Chain Store Association and secured for me a copy of a debate on the subject. He feels that the chain store is rendering a real service to humanity. He is proud of what he is doing for hundreds of communities. His eyes fairly glowed as he talked, and I must confess that he opened my eyes to things I had never even dreamed of. He changed my whole mental attitude. As I was leaving, he walked with me to the door, put his arm around my shoulder, wished me well in my debate, and asked me to stop in and see him again and let him know how I made out. The last words he said to me were, "Please see me again later in the spring. I should like to place an order with you for fuel." To me, that was almost a miracle. Here he was offering to buy fuel without my even suggesting it. I had made more headway in 2 hours by becoming genuinely interested in him and his problems than I could have made in 10 years trying to get him interested in me and my product. You didn't discover a new truth, Mr. Naple. For a long time ago, 100 years before Christ was born, a famous and old Roman poet, Publius Cyrus, remarked, "We are interested in others when they are interested in us." A show of interest, as with every other principle of human relations, must be sincere. It must pay off not only for the person showing the interest, but for the person receiving the attention. It is a two-way street. Both parties benefit. Martin Ginsburg, who took our course in Long Island, New York, reported how the special interest in a nurse took in him profoundly affected his life. It was Thanksgiving Day, and I was 10 years old. I was in a welfare ward of a city hospital and was scheduled to undergo a major orthopedic surgery the next day. I knew that I could only look forward to months of confinement, convalescence, and pain. My father was dead. My mother and I lived in a small apartment, and we were on welfare. My mother was unable to visit me that day. As the day went on, I became overwhelmed with a feeling of loneliness, despair, and fear. I knew my mother was home alone, worrying about me, not having anyone to be with, not having anyone to eat with, and not even having enough money to afford a Thanksgiving Day dinner. The tears welled up in my eyes, and I stuck my head under the pillow and pulled the covers over it. I cried silently, but oh so bitterly, so much that my body racked with pain. A young student nurse heard my sobbing and came over to me. She took the covers off my face and started wiping my tears. She told me how lonely she was, having to work that day and not being able to be with her family. She asked me whether I would have dinner with her. She brought 2 trays of food, sliced turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and ice cream for dessert. She talked to me and tried to calm my fears. Even though she was scheduled to go off at 4 p.m., she stayed on her own time until almost 11 p.m. She played games with me, talked to me, and stayed with me until I finally fell asleep. Many Thanksgivings have come and gone since I was 10, but one never passes without me remembering the particular one and my feelings of frustration, fear, loneliness, and the warmth and tenderness of this stranger that somehow made all that bearable. If you want others to like you, if you want to develop real friendships, if you want to help others at the same time as you help yourself, keep this principle in mind. Principle 1, become genuinely interested in other people. A simple way to make a good first impression. At a dinner party in New York, one of the guests, a woman who had inherited money, was eager to make a pleasing impression on everyone. She had squandered a modest fortune on sables, diamonds, and pearls, but she She hadn't done anything whatever about her face. It radiated soreness and selfishness. She didn't realize what everyone knows, namely that the expression one wears on one's face is far more important than the clothes one wears on one's back. Charles Schwab told me his smile had been worth $1 million, and he was probably Charles Schwab told me his smile had been worth $1 million, and he was probably understating the truth. For Schwab's personality, his charm, his ability to make people like him, were almost wholly responsible for his extraordinary success. And one of the most delightful factors in his personality was his captivating smile. Actions speak louder than words, and a smile says, "I like you, you make me happy, I am glad to see you." This is why dogs make such a hit. They are so glad to see us that they almost jump out of their skin. So naturally, we're glad to see them. A baby's smile has the same effect. Have you ever been in a doctor's waiting room and looked around at all the glum faces waiting impatiently to be seen? Dr. Stephen K. Sproul, a veterinarian in Raytown, Missouri, told of a typical spring day when his waiting room was full of clients waiting to have their pets inoculated. No one was talking to anyone else, and all were probably thinking of a dozen other things they would rather be doing than wasting time sitting in that office. He told one of our classes there were 6 or 7 clients waiting when a young woman came in with a 9-month-old baby and a kitten. As luck would have it, she sat down next to a gentleman who was more than a little distraught about the long wait for service. The next thing he knew, the baby just looked up at him with that great big smile, and that is so characteristic of babies. What did the gentleman do? Just what you and I would do, of course. He smiled back at the baby. Soon, he struck up a conversation with the woman about her baby and his grandchildren. And soon the entire reception room joined in, and the boredom and tension were converted into a pleasant and enjoyable experience. An insincere grin? No, that doesn't fool anybody. We know it. It is mechanical, and we resent it. I am talking about a real smile, a heartwarming smile, a smile that comes from within, the kind of smile that will bring a good price in the marketplace. Professor James V. McConnell, a psychologist at the University of Michigan, expressed his feelings about a smile. People who smile, he said, tend to manage, teach, and sell more effectively. People who smile tend to manage, teach, and smile more tend to manage, teach, and sell more effectively, and to raise happier children. There's far more information in a smile than a frown. That's why encouragement is a much more effective teaching device than punishment. The employment manager of a large New York department store told me she would rather hire a sales clerk who hadn't finished grade school if he or she has a pleasant smile than to hire a doctor of philosophy with a somber face. The effect of a smile is powerful even when it is unseen. Telephone companies throughout the United States have a program called Phone Power, which is offered to employees who use the telephone for selling their services or products. In this program, they suggest that you smile when talking on the phone. Your smile comes through in your voice. Robert Cryer, manager of a computer department for a Cincinnati, Ohio company, told how he successfully found the right applicant for a hard-to-fill position. I was desperately trying to recruit a PhD in computer science for my department. I finally located a young man with ideal qualifications who was about to be graduated from Purdue University. After several phone conversations, I learned that he had several offers from other companies, many of them larger and better known than mine. I was delighted when he accepted my offer. After he started on the job, I asked him why he had chosen us over the others. He paused for a moment, then he said, "I think it was because managers in the other companies spoke on the phone like in a cold, business-like manner, which made me feel like just like another business transaction. Your voice sounded as if you were glad to hear from me." that you really wanted me to be a part of your organization. You can be assured I am still answering my phone with a smile. The chairman on a board of directors of one of the largest rubber companies in the United States told me that according to his observations, people rarely succeeded at anything unless they have fun doing it. I'm underlining that one. People rarely succeed at doing anything unless they have fun doing it. This industrial leader doesn't put much faith in the old adage that hard work alone is the magic key that will unlock the doors to our desires. I have known people, he said, who succeeded because they had a rip-roaring good time conducting their business. Later, I saw those people change as the fun became work. The business had grown dull. They lost all joy in it and they failed. You must have a good time meeting people if you expect them to have a good time meeting you. I have asked thousands of business people to smile at someone every hour of the day for a week and then come to a class and talk about the results. How did it work? Let's see. Here's a letter from William B. Steinhardt, a New York stockbroker. His case isn't isolated. In fact, it is typical of hundreds of cases. I have been married for over 18 years, wrote Mr. Steinhardt, and in all that time I seldom smiled at my wife or spoke 24 words to her from the time I got up until I was ready to leave for business. I was one of the worst grouches who ever walked down Broadway. When you asked me to make a talk about an experience with smiles, I thought I would try it for a week. So the next morning, while combing my hair, I looked at my glum mug in the mirror and said to myself, Bill, you're going to wipe the scowl off that sour pus of yours today. You are going to smile, and you are going to begin right now. As I sat down to breakfast, I greeted my wife with a good morning, my dear, and smiled as I said it. You warned me that she might be surprised. Well, you underestimated her reaction. She was bewildered. She was shocked. I told her that in the future she could expect this as a regular occurrence, and I kept it up every morning. This changed attitude of mine brought more happiness into our home in the 2 months since I started than there was during the last year. As I leave from my office, I greet the elevator operator in the apartment house with a good morning and a smile. I greet the doorman with a smile. I smile at the cashier in the subway booth when I ask for change. As I stand on the floor of the stock exchange, I smile at people who, until recently, never saw me smile. I soon found that everybody was smiling back at me. I treat those who come to me with complaints or grievances in a cheerful manner. I'm starting that one. Everybody was smiling back at me. I treat those who come to me with complaints or grievances in a cheerful manner. I smile as I listen to them, and I find that adjustments are accomplished much easier. I find that smiles are bringing me dollars, many dollars every day. I share my office with another broker. One of his clerks is a likable young chap, and I was so elated about the results I was getting that I told him recently about my new philosophy of human relations. He then confessed that when I first came to share my office with his firm, he thought about a terrible grouch, and only recently changed his mind. He said I was really human when I smiled. I have also eliminated criticism from my system. I give appreciation and praise now instead of condemnation. I have stopped talking about what I want, and I am now trying to see the other person's point of view. And these things have literally revolutionized my life. I am a totally different man, a happier man, a richer man, richer in friendships and happiness, the only things that matter much after all. You don't feel like smiling? Then what? 2 things. First, force yourself to smile. If you are alone, force yourself to whistle or hum a tune or sing. Act as if you are already happy, and that will tend to make you happy. Here is the way the psychologist and philosopher William James put it. Action seems to follow feeling. But really, action and feeling go together. And by regulating the action, which is under the more direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling which is not. So actions seem to follow feelings, but really action and feeling go together. And by regulating the action, which is under the more direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling which is not. Thus, the sovereign, voluntary path to cheerfulness, if our cheerfulness be lost, is to sit up cheerfully and to act and speak as if cheerfulness were already there. Everybody in the world is seeking happiness. There is one sure way to find it. This is by controlling your thoughts. Happiness doesn't depend on outward conditions, it depends on inner conditions. It isn't what you have or who you are or where you are or what you are doing that makes you happy or unhappy. It is what you think about. For example, two people may be in the same place doing the same thing, both may have about an equal amount of money and prestige, and yet one may be miserable and the other happy. Why? Because of a different mental attitude. I've been seeing just as happy as just as many happy faces among the poor peasants toiling with their primitive tools in this devastating heat of the tropics as I have seen in air-conditioned offices in New York, Chicago, or Los Angeles. There's nothing either good or bad, said Shakespeare, but thinking makes it so. I'm underlining that one. There is nothing either good or bad, said Shakespeare, but thinking makes it so. Abe Lincoln once remarked that most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. Most folks are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. He was right. I saw a vivid illustration of that truth as I was walking up the stairs of the Long Island Railroad Station in New York. Directly in front of me, 30 or 40 crippled boys on canes and crutches were struggling up the stairs. One boy had to be carried. I was astonished at their laughter and gaiety. I spoke about it to one of the men in charge of the boys. Oh yes, he said, when a boy realizes that he's going to be crippled for life, he is shocked at first, but after he gets over the shock, he usually resigns himself to his fate and then becomes as happy as normal boys. I felt like taking my hat off to those boys. They taught me a lesson I hope I shall never forget. Working all by oneself in a closed off room in an office not only is lonely, but it denies one the opportunity of making friends with other employees in the company. Senora Maria Gonzalez of Guadalajara, Mexico, had such a job. She envied the shared comradeship of other people in the company as she heard their chatter and laughter. As she passed them in the hall during the first weeks of her employment, she shyly looked the other way. After a few weeks, she said to herself, Maria, you can't expect those women to come to you. You have to go out and meet them. Next time she walked to the water cooler, she put on her brightest smile and said, Hi, how are you doing today? To each of the people she met. The effect was immediate. Smiles and hellos were returned. The hallways seemed brighter, the job friendlier. Acquaintanceships developed and some ripened into friendships. Her job and her life became more pleasant and interesting. Peruse this bit of sage advice from the essayist and publisher Albert Hubbard, but remember perusing, it won't do you any good unless you apply it. Whenever you go out of doors, draw the chin in. Carry the crown of the head high and fill the lungs to the utmost. Drink in the sunshine, greet your friends with a smile, and put soul, into every hand clasp. Do not fear being misunderstood and do not waste a minute thinking about your enemies. Try to fix firmly in your mind what you would like to do, and then, without veering off direction, you will move straight to the goal. Keep your mind on the great and splendid things you would like to do, and then as the days go gliding away, you will find yourself unconsciously seizing upon the opportunities that are required for the fulfillment of your desire. Just as the coral insect takes from the running tide the element it needs. Picture in your mind the able, earnest, useful person you desire to be, and the thought you hold is hourly transforming you into that particular individual. Thought is supreme. Preserve a right mental attitude, the attitude of courage, frankness, and good cheer. To think rightly is to create. All things come through desire, and every sincere prayer is answered. Underline that one. All things come through desire, and every sincere prayer is answered. We become like that on which our hearts are fixed. Carry your chin in, and the crown of your head high. We are gods in the chrysalis. In the chrysalis, I'm going to say. The ancient Chinese were a wise lot, wise in the ways of the world. And they had a proverb that you and I ought to cut out and paste into our hats. It goes like this: a man without a smiling face must not open a shop. A man without a smiling face must not open a shop. Your smile is a messenger of your goodwill. Your smile brightens the lives of all who see it. Your smile is a messenger of goodwill. Your smile brightens the lives of all who see it. To someone who has seen a dozen people frown, scowl, or turn their faces away, your smile is like the sun breaking through the clouds. Especially when that person is under pressure from his bosses, his customers, his teachers, or parents, or children. A smile can help him realize that all is not hopeless and that there is joy in the world. Some years ago, a department store in New York City, in recognition of the pressures that sales clerks were under during the Christmas rush, presented the readers of its advertisement with the following homely philosophy. The value of a smile at Christmas. It costs nothing but creates much. It enriches those who receive without impoverishing those who give. It happens in a flash, and the memory of it sometime lasts forever. None are so rich that they get along without it, and none so poor but are richer for its benefits. Excuse me. It creates happiness in the home, fosters goodwill in a business, and is the countersign of friends. It is rest to the weary, daylight to the discouraged, sunshine to the sad, and nature's best antidote for trouble. Yet it cannot be bought, begged, borrowed, or stolen, for it's something that is no earthly good to anybody till it is given away. And if in the last minute rush of Christmas buying, some of our salespeople should be too tired to give you a smile, may we ask you to leave one of yours. For nobody needs a smile so much as those who have none left to give. Principle 2, smile. If you don't do this, you are headed for trouble. Back in 1898, a tragic thing happened in Rockland County, New York. A child had died, and on this particular day, the neighbors were preparing to go to the funeral. Jim Farley went to the barn to hitch up his horse. The ground was covered with snow. The air was cold and snappy. The horse hadn't been exercised for days, and as he was led out to the watering trough, he wheeled playfully, kicked both of his heels in the air, and killed Jim Farley. In the little village of Stony Point had two funerals that week instead of one. Jim Farley left behind a widow and 3 boys and a few $100s in insurance. His oldest boy Jim was 10, and he went to work in a brickyard, wheeling sand and pouring it into the molds and turning the brick on edge to be dried by the sun. This boy Jim never had a chance to get much education, but with his natural geniality, he had a flair for making people like him. So he went into politics, and as the years went by, he developed an uncanny ability for remembering people's names. He never saw the inside of a high school, but before he was 46 years of age, four colleges had honored him with degrees and he had become chairman of the Democratic National Committee and Postmaster General of the United States. I once interviewed Jim Farley and asked him the secret of his success. He said, hard work, and I said, don't be funny. He then asked me what I thought was the reason for his success. I replied, I understand you can tell 10,000 people by their first name. No, you're wrong, he said. I can call 50,000 people by their first names. Make no mistake about it, the ability helped Mr. Farley put Franklin D. Roosevelt in the White House when he managed Roosevelt's campaign in 1932. During the years that Jim Farley traveled as a salesman for Gypsum Concern, and during the years that he held office as town clerk in Stony Point, he built up a system for remembering names. In the beginning, it was a very simple one. Whenever he met a new acquaintance, he found out his or her complete name and some facts about his or her family, business, and political opinions. He fixed all these facts in the mind as part of the picture, and next time he met that person, even if it was a year later, he was able to shake hands, inquire after the family, and ask about the hollyhocks in the backyard. No wonder he developed the following. For months before Roosevelt's campaign for president began, Jim Farley wrote hundreds of letters a day to people all over the western and northwestern states. Then he hopped onto a train and in 19 days covered 20 states and 12,000 miles, traveling by buggy, train, automobile, and boat. He would drop in town, meet his people at lunch or breakfast, tea or dinner, and give them a heart-to-heart talk. Then he'd dash off again on another leg of his journey. As soon as he arrived back east, he wrote to a person in each town he had visited, asking for a list of all the guests to whom he had talked. The final list contained thousands and thousands of names, yet each person on that list was paid the subtle flattery of getting a personal letter from James Farley. These letters began, Dear Bill, Dear Jane, right? They were always signed Jim. Jim Farley discovered early in life that the average person is more interested in his or her own name than in all the other names on the earth put together. Remember that name and call it easily, and you have paid a subtle and very effective compliment. But forget it or misspell it, and you have placed yourself at a sharp disadvantage. For example, I once organized a public speaking course in Paris and sent form letters to all the American residents in the city. French typists were apparently little knowledge of English filled in the names, and naturally they made blunders. One man, the manager of a large American bank in Paris, wrote me a scathing rebuke because his name had been misspelled. Wow. Sometimes it is difficult to remember a name, particularly if it is hard to pronounce. Rather than even try to learn it, many people ignore it or call the person by an easy nickname. Sid Levy called on a customer for some time whose name was Nicodemus Papadoulis. Most people called him Nick. Levy told us, I made a specific effort to say his name over several times to myself before I made my call. When I greeted him by his full name, Good afternoon, Mr. Nicholas Papadoulis, he was shocked. For what seemed like several minutes, there was no reply from him at all. Finally, he said with tears rolling down his cheeks, Mr. Levy, in all 15 years I've been in this country, nobody has ever made the effort to call me by my right name. What was the reason for Andrew Carnegie's success? He was called the Steel King, yet he himself knew little about the manufacture of steel. He had hundreds of people working for him who knew far more about steel than he did, but he knew how to handle people, and that is what made him rich. Early in life, he showed a flair for organization, a genius for leadership. By the time he was 10, he had discovered the astounding importance people placed on their own name, and he used that discovery to win cooperation. To illustrate, when he was a boy back in Scotland, he got a hold of a mother rabbit. Presto. He soon had a whole nest of little rabbits and nothing to feed them, but he had a brilliant idea. He told the boys and girls in the neighborhood that if they were to go out and pull enough clover and dandelions to feed the rabbits, he would name the bunnies in their honor. The plan worked like magic. Carnegie never forgot. Years later, he made millions by using the same psychology in business. For example, he wanted to sell steel rails to the Pennsylvania Railroad. J. Edgar Thompson was the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad then. So Andrew Carnegie built a huge steel mill in Pittsburgh and called it the Eager Thompson Steel Works. Here's a riddle. See if you can guess it. When the Pennsylvania Railroad needed steel rails, who do you suppose J. Edgar Thomas bought them? From Sears? Roebuck? No. You're wrong. Guess again. When Carnegie and George Pullman were battling each other for supremacy in the railroad sleeping car business, the Steel King again remembered the lesson of the rabbits. The Central Transportation Company, with Andrew Carnegie. Hey man, it's like these last 2 pages and I'm like, get it. The plan worked like magic and Carnegie never forgot it. Years later, he made millions by using the same psychology in business. For example, he wanted to sell steel rails to the Pennsylvania Railroad. J. Edgar Thomas was the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad then. So Andrew Carnegie built a huge steel mill in Pittsburgh and called it the Edgar Thomas Steel Works. Here's a riddle. See if you can guess it. When the Pennsylvania Railroad needed steel rails, where do you suppose J. Edgar Thompson bought them? From Sears? Roebuck? No. You're wrong. Guess again. When Carnegie and George Pullman were battling each other for supremacy in the railroad sleeping car business, the Steel King again remembered the lesson of the rabbits. The Central Transportation Company, which Andrew Carnegie controlled, was fighting with the company that Pullman owned. Both were struggling to get the sleeping car business of the Union Pacific Railroad, bucking each other, slashing prices, and destroying all chance of profit. Both Carnegie and Pullman had gone to New York to see the board of directors of the Union Pacific meeting. One evening, the St. Nicholas Hotel, Carnegie said, "Good evening, Mr. Pullman. Aren't we making a couple of fools out of ourselves?" "What do you mean?" Pullman demanded. Then Carnegie expressed what he had on his mind, a merger of the two interests. He pictured in glowing terms the mutual advantages of working with instead of against each other. Pullman listened attentively, but he was not wholly convinced. Finally, he asked, "What would you call the new company?" And Carnegie replied promptly, "Why, the Pullman Palace Car Company, of course." Pullman's face brightened. "Come into my room," he said. "Let's talk it over." And then that talk made industrial history. This policy of remembering and honoring the names of his friends and business associates was one of the secrets of Andrew Carnegie's leadership. He was proud of the fact that he could call many of his factory workers by their first names, and he boasted that while he was personally in charge, no strike ever disturbed his flaming steel mills. Benton Love, chairman of Texas Commerce Bank Shares, he believes believes that the bigger a corporation gets, the colder it becomes. One way to warm it up, he said, is to remember people's names. The executive who tells me he can't remember names is at the same time telling me he can't remember a significant part of his business and is operating on quicksand. Start that one. Karen Kirsch of Rancho Palos Verdes, California, a flight attendant for TWA, made it a practice to learn the names of as many passengers in her cabin as possible and use the name when serving them. This resulted in many compliments on her service expressed both to her directly and to the airline. One passenger wrote, I haven't flown TWA for some time, but I'm going to start flying nothing but TWA from now on. You make me feel that your airline has become a very personalized airline that is important to me. People are so proud of their names that they strive to perpetuate them at any cost. Even blustering, hard-boiled old P.T. Barnum, the greatest showman of his time, disappointed because he had no sons to carry on his name, offered his grandson C.H. Seeley $25,000 if he could call himself Burnham Seeley. For many centuries, nobles and magnates supported artists, musicians, and authors so that their creative works would be dictated to them. Libraries and museums owe their richest collections to people who cannot bear to think their names might perish from the memory of the race. The New York Public Library has its Astor and Lenox collections. The Metropolitan Museum perpetuates the names of Benjamin Alton and J.P. Morgan, and nearly every last 2 pages church is beautified by stained glass windows commemorating the names of their donors. Many of the buildings on the campus of the most universities bear the names of donors who contributed large sums of money for this honor. Most people don't remember names for the simple reason that they don't take the time and energy necessary to concentrate and fix names indelibly in their minds. They make excuses for themselves. They are too busy. But they were probably no busier than Franklin D. Roosevelt, and he took time to remember and recall even the names of the mechanics with whom he came into contact. To illustrate, the Chrysler organization built a special car for Mr. Roosevelt. He could not use a standard car because his legs were paralyzed. W.F. Chamberlain and the mechanic delivered it to the White House. I have in front of me a letter from Mr. Chamberlain relating his experiences. I taught President Roosevelt how to handle a car with a lot of unusual gadgets, but he taught me a lot about the fine art of handling people. When I called at the White House, Mr. Chamberlain writes, the president was extremely pleasant and cheerful. He called me by name, made me very comfortable, and particularly impressed me with the fact that he was vitally interested in things I had to show him and tell him. The car was so designed that it could be operated entirely by hand. The crowd gathered around it to look at the car, and he remarked, I think it is marvelous. All you have to do is touch a button and it moves away and you can drive it without effort. I think it is grand. I don't know what makes it go. I'd love to have the time to tear it down and see how it works. When Roosevelt's friends and associates admired the machine, he said in their presence, Mr. Chamberlain, I certainly appreciate all the time and effort you have spent in developing this car. It is a mighty fine job. He admired the radiator, special rear vision mirror and clock, the special spotlight kind of upholstery, the sitting position of the driver's seat, the special suitcases in the trunk, that his monogram on each suitcase. In other words, he took notice of every detail to which he knew I had given considerable thought. He made a point of bringing these various pieces of equipment to the attention of Mrs. Roosevelt, Mrs. Perkins, the Secretary of Labor, and his secretary. He even brought the old White House porter into the picture by saying, George, you want to take particularly good care of the suitcases. When the driving lesson was finished, the president turned to me and said, well, Mr. Chamberlain, I have been keeping the Federal Reserve Board waiting 30 minutes. I guess I had better get back to work. I took a mechanic with me to the White House. He was introduced to Roosevelt when he arrived. He didn't talk to the president, and Roosevelt heard his name only once. He was a shy chap, and he kept in the background, but before leaving us, the president looked for the mechanic, shook his hand, called him by name, and then thanked him for coming to Washington. And there was nothing perfunctory about his thanks. He meant what he said. I could feel that. A few days after returning to New York, I got an autographed photo of President Roosevelt and a little note of thanks again, expressing his appreciation for my assistance. How he found time to do it is a mystery to me. Franklin D. Roosevelt knew that one of the simplest, most obvious, and important ways of gaining goodwill was by remembering names and making people feel important. Yet how many of us does he do it to? How many of us do it? Half the time we are introduced to a stranger, we chat a few minutes and can't even remember his or her name by the time we say goodbye. One of the first lessons as a politician learns is this. To recall a voter's name is statesmanship. To forget it is oblivion. And the ability to remember names is almost as important in business and social context as it is in politics. Napoleon III, Emperor of France and nephew of the great Napoleon, boasted that in spite of all his royal duties, he could remember the name of every person he met. His technique simple. If he didn't hear the name distinctly, he said, so sorry, I didn't get the name clearly. Then if it was an unusual name, he would say, how is it spelled? During the conversation, he took the trouble to repeat the name several times and tried to associate it in his mind with the person's features, expression, and general appearance. If the person was someone of importance, Napoleon went to even further pains. As soon as His Royal Highness was alone, he wrote the name down on a piece of paper, looked at it, concentrated on it, fixed it securely in his mind, and then tore up the paper in his way. In his way, he gained an eye impression of the name as well as an ear impression. All the time All this takes time, but good manners, said Emerson, are made up of petty sacrifices. That's tough. The importance of remembering and using names is not just the prerogative of kings and corporate executives, it works for all of us. Ken Nottingham, an employee of General Motors in Indiana, usually had lunch at the company cafeteria. He noticed that the woman who worked behind the counter always had a scowl on her face. She had been making sandwiches for about 2 hours, and I was just another sandwich to her. I've told her what I wanted. She weighed out the ham on a little scale. Then she gave me one leaf of lettuce, a few potato chips, and handed them to me. The next day, I went through the same line. Same woman, same scowl. The only difference was I noticed her name tag. I smiled and said, "Hello, Eunice," and then told her I wanted what I wanted. Well, she forgot the scale, piled on the ham, gave me 3 leaves of lettuce, and heaped on the potato chips until they fell off the plate. We should be aware of the magic contained in a name and realize that this simple item is wholly and completely owned by the person with whom we are dealing, and nobody else. The name sets the individual apart. It makes him or her unique among all others. The information we are imparting or the request we are making takes on a special importance when we approach the situation with the name of the individual. From the waitress to the senior executive, the name will work magic as we deal with others. Principle 3. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Amen. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, the second part, we're on part 2. Part 2 is 6 ways to make people like you. Right, the first principle. First principle, principle 1, become genuinely interested in other people. Principle 2, smile. And principle 3, remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Don't be like KD. Use some lotion. Link in bio. Follow for more. God bless.